How's it going, everyone? We are here to uh podcast podcast week 14 FanDuel quarterbacks,
DraftKings.
DraftKings quarterbacks. See, I like how it's important that I jokingly screwed around at the beginning, so when I actually made the real mistake, it just all seemed like I was being sarcastic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but in reality, it was just a completely botched intro to begin with.
Yeah, because see, initially it was supposed to be funny, and then I turned it into a real mistake. And here we are. So I think it's a really interesting week at quarterback. There's going to be low ownership on some really good players in what is considered by most less than matchups. But as I'm reading through Jason's and as I'm kind of deciding what exposure I'm going to get, I think there's some interesting ways to get some like under 10% quarterbacks here.
This week, I mean, this is probably the grossest week in terms of lack of obvious matchups to really target. I mean, we got a couple high totals we can look at that I'll be choosing quarterbacks from, but yeah, for the most part, I mean, it's not a pretty week. I mean, you know, a couple of these guys aren't tremendous quarterbacks. We got two elite guys, but the rest are kind of guys who can go either way.
Certainly. So let's get into some cash game. Now, I think this is a flaming hot take, kind of like the flaming hot Cheetos. Uh, Andrew Luck in cash. Let's do it, baby. 6,900 against the Texans. We're coming for you, Brock Osweiler and Bill O'Brien.
6,900 reasonable price here. So I was waiting. I had this article done Monday night, and I was waiting for that game to finish because I was waiting for the team total to come out for the next day. Second highest on the board behind Tampa Bay. So you're obviously looking here at a Colts, team that they're expected to score some points. One, they're at home. Luck has played better at home this season. You look at Houston, who has been trending downwards in the defensive department. I mean, over the last three games, allowing 114 passer rating, 99.5 passer rating on the road this season, 2.7 passing touchdowns per game in that span. And you just look at this Colts offense. I mean, they're really built to throw. They're finally healthy. I mean, Luck obviously coming off a 4-touchdown game basically in three quarters against it was definitely a plus matchup for him. This isn't as good, but you look at, Luck, I mean, averaging 24 DK points per game at home this year. Houston's pass rush has suffered a little bit of late. I do like a couple other corners, but they're not necessarily scaring me away from Moncrief or Hilton this week.
I'm totally with you. Even if he's not necessarily the most it's still a slightly volatile matchup. But when you look at the ownership, when you take into account, what his upside is against anyone right now, finally healthy, 6,900 is pretty easy to slot in there.
This is a meaningful game. I mean,
yeah,
this is a playoff
must
game
win
right now.
And, that's the Colts are going to win by offense. And so either they're down and he's in comeback mode or they're up because he's crushing. So I think this is going to be good news for Luck this week. Andy Dalton against the Bengals or against the Browns. I mean, 6,100. This one's pretty easy, I think.
Yeah, nice value play. I mean, it's 800 cheaper than Luck, so if you need that cash to do something else, I'm not afraid to pivot down to Dalton this week. Good team total sitting there at 24. Football Outsiders has the Browns ranked 31st against the pass. 33% DVOA, allowing the third most DK points per game to opposing QBs. Obviously you're missing, AJ Green there, but Tyler Eifert, Brendan LaFell, Tyler Boyd, some cheap pairing partners you can use with Dalton this week. I think he's a great GPP quarterback as well, just because of the correlation with those guys, especially if you're paying up at running back. The Bengals are kind of a cheap stack or a cheap duo you can toss in with them. So Browns allowing, nearly 12 yards per completion this year, 260 yards per game. I find it easy that Dalton hits value here with at least two touchdowns, whether one comes on the ground or both through the air. I think 250, 300 yards is, really what you're looking at here.
Totally agree. I like it. I like it a lot. Dalton's going to be the guy to get exposure to. Always, worried about Jeremy Hill stealing some of those touchdowns, but generally speaking, I think this is going to be a great game flow game for the Bengals passing game. So stacking Dalton with Boyd, LaFell, Eifert, I'm all in. Do whatever you want. Even a full Bengals onslaught, I think, is in play this week. GPP quarterbacks. I'm pretty fired up to see your first guy here. Let's go, Aaron Rodgers. Let's go. 6,400. We got playoffs to make, buddy. Let's go. 6,400. Offense turning it around. We need 5 touchdowns, Aaron. Let's go.
The price drop was significant. I mean, I think that's the most attractive price drop I've seen in football in quite some time. 6,400. This is a guy who's usually above 7K, 7,200, 7,400. And we're getting him for about 1,000 cheaper. Obviously, a home matchup against Seattle. Seattle's still a pretty good defense, even with their injuries. Obviously, the loss of Earl Thomas really is huge. I think if Earl Thomas was playing and Rodgers was priced up a little bit more, I wouldn't even be on him this week. But I think with those two things to consider, you're really looking at Rodgers. This is a pass-heavy offense. They throw the 4th most pass attempts per game. 85% of their touchdowns come through the air. 3 touchdown total. I can definitely see a multi-touchdown game for Rodgers. And you look at this week, I think, you got to go back to week 6 when he didn't throw more than, 2 or more touchdowns. So he's been fairly consistent. Obviously, this Packers offense, has been up and down at times this year. But with the price drop like this, cafe value projections all very high on Rodgers this week. I am too. He's a sneaky guy, and I think you can play him naked as well.
Ooh, naked. I like that.
Yeah.
You can't understate losing Earl Thomas. That's a huge deal. They're still going to be reasonable defense, but overall, that's tough. Jameis Winston, 6,700 against the Saints. What are you looking at here? And I will ask, is it a requirement to play Mike Evans if you play Winston?
No, I don't think so.
You're wrong.
I don't. I like Mike Evans this week.
Yeah,
Obviously.
no, that's okay. You can be wrong. I was just wondering if you were going to be wrong or not.
No, I mean,
So, that's fair.
Obviously, Mike Evans is the number one target, number one, wide receiver this week. I like him over OBJ. I like him over Brown, Julio Jones. Expensive. It would be an expensive stack because Winston's priced up a bit this week based off of matchups. So he's a little bit volatile for me, and given the fact that he is priced up, I mean, he's more than Rodgers, a little bit cheaper than Luck. But, this is a guy who's been under 20 DK points in half of his games this year. So it's not quite the consistent cash game that you're looking, even with the matchup. I could see, a game where they struggle a little bit. But overall, I mean, with a high team total like this and a matchup like this, it's kind of hard to get away from a Winston, Cameron Brate, Mike Evans stack, and even just solo Brate. I'd even don't mind. So, I think the price is really what pushes me into a GPP territory. If he was cheaper, you could look at it in cash, but not this week for me.
As Kid Cudi would say, solo dolo is what he would say in 2009 when I was still up on the hits. Great CD. Great CD.
When Kid Cudi's music was good. Yes.
Yeah. And then Wizard happened and it's all over.
Yeah.
Carson Palmer, against the Dolphins, I don't think any of us are really all that excited about him at this stage in the season, but he does still get the volume, super cheap, like cheaper than we've seen him in a while against this Dolphins team that I think, he could take advantage of with the JJ Nelsons and Larry Fitzgeralds of the world. So I guess I'll ask you this in terms of the logic for Palmer. Now, would you think of playing Palmer in a fade David Johnson type lineup, or are you just okay with throwing him in with John? Obviously, you're okay with throwing him in with Johnson, but is that kind of a sneaky way to get exposure to worst case Johnson scenario?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, obviously both are in play. You could use Palmer and Johnson together, especially given the fact that Johnson's been basically their leading wide receiver over the last few weeks. And he's cheap. I mean, 5,700. It was kind of hard to find a guy below 6K this week that I really felt comfortable with. Palmer's even a guy I don't really feel tremendously comfortable with, but better than others. And obviously going on the road is a little bit different for this Cardinals team that we have seen struggle going to the East Coast. So that's one thing to consider. But I think this is a misleading matchup against this this Dolphins defense. I mean, allowing the 5th most DK points to QBs. We look at Palmer. I mean, 7 touchdowns over the last 3 games. Definitely more of a GPP play. But as you mentioned, the volume's there. They air it out. I mean, most passing attempts per game. Him and Fitzgerald. We can get JJ Nelson more involved. Debating on what happens with their wide receiver 2 spot, if we can get a good read and who's going to be there. There's some interesting stacks to kind of go about with this Arizona team because, they're in a spot where they also need to win. And that's kind of what I'm looking at here for this week.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I think that's an interesting way to go if you're not looking at Dalton. That's kind of the nice little swerve down there. I think this is a fun group. I think there's going to be really spread out ownership because I don't think people like how Rodgers has played this year. I don't think people like Luck in that matchup, plus some of the results he's given this year. Dalton's been inconsistent without AJ Green. All these guys have been inconsistent. So I think tournaments are going to be really fun this week. Is there anything you want to throw in there before we head out?
I guess my dark horse this week is Eli Manning. He's below 6K. He's at home, and that's what gives me a little bit more confidence. And obviously, Dallas's secondary isn't tremendous, but the game flow still scares me anytime someone plays Dallas. So if the Giants defense can pick things up, Eli Manning's actually got a good shot here to hit value and actually be kind of a sneaky play this week.
Eli Manning is the Rice Pilaf of quarterbacks.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
he's more like Mexican burrito because you go to different places and you don't know what you're going to get out of it.
Every time you're just like, I have no idea what's coming down the pipe here. Yeah, that's a really good comparison. All right. We are done for this week. Hopefully you check this out. If you want to read the article, head over to dailyfantasycafe.com. Certainly read that. If you like what we're doing on these videos, give us a like and subscribe. And other such things. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you guys in week 15.